Hey Powrsuiters, we've just released the dates for our 2024 Power Sessions in Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland, Melbourne and Sydney. We'd love to meet you in person for our month-long transformative leadership program specifically designed for women. Save your spot at powrsuit.com. Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts Nat and Kristen as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
Hello. Welcome to our second Minisode, where we, Nat and Kristen, I'm Nat, the Kiwi accent, challenge ourselves to tackle a Powrsuiters question in 15 minutes. If you have a question you'd like us to answer, we will have a call to action in every newsletter we send out each week, so you can simply reply to that with your burning question or email us at hello@powrsuit.com. Doesn't matter how big or small it is, we can sort of zhuzh it up a bit if we need to, and we try and not yammer on like this too much that we can crack straight into it.
We are. And the question that's come into us is, I'm a young, slightly smaller Asian woman, and I feel intimidated and not taken seriously or respected in meetings. This is a tricky one, because we know from our experience with Powrsuit is that there is a real strong vision of what a leader should look like, how a leader should act in a meeting, in front of a group. And when we don't fit into that vision, we effectively feel like an imposter.
And we've actually spoken, funnily enough, to quite a lot of younger Asian women and Pacific Island women where culture has a real part to play in this. If you've grown up in a culture and exist in a culture that is really collaborative, that is very respect your elders and put other people first, and really that kind of really respectful and, is it differential? Throwing yourself into a meeting where the primary group of people or the culture is very white, it's very male, those clash, and it's very easy to see yourself as an imposter because everything you're taught to do at home and the things you believe are normal are very much in contrast to what you're experiencing in the meeting.
Absolutely. And it really is a common challenge faced by women, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, because we have this idea of even executive presence. And we've done a podcast on this and really debunked this myth and this feedback that we tend to get. But there is a stigma associated with how different cultures act in predominantly white Anglo-Saxon workplaces, which is effectively New Zealand. And so there is a way of acting and looking and sounding and engaging, and it really is tricky for those with different backgrounds.
Absolutely. And I think obviously the quickest win that we can give to anyone who is not a young Asian woman is to recognize that. Yeah. That is a very easy thing that all of us as allies can do, is to recognize that what our version of confidence looks like, what our version of leadership looks like, are very much biased in our own ways based on our backgrounds. And so to be really, really careful to check that bias and challenge what we think is, in quotation marks, normal behavior in a meeting, and really start to look for leadership and communication and collaboration in different ways and recognize those two are really important and very valuable.
These are kind of things that are outside of her control. This particular Powrsuiter that wrote in, allyship is so important, but equally is navigating education in the workplace. So really, what does the culture of that workplace look like? And when I say culture, it's not social club and how do we drink and how do we get together socially and who's planning the Christmas party. It is literally, how do we engage and how do we show up at work and how do we behave at work with people with different perspectives, with people with different ways of working, different ways of thinking, and all of the uniqueness that we bring into work. I think there was this term that we used, what is it? Bring your whole self to work. Are there genuinely cultures that can do that and can accept people for who they are, where they've come from, and how they want to present at work? And so there's this real while not in her control, we're hoping to speak to a bunch of leaders, where are these conversations happening at your workplace? What are the formal practices you're putting into place to be embracing of people bringing themselves to work?
Yeah, otherwise you're leaving so much value on the table because you are looking at a very narrow definition of what value looks like. So let's flip quickly, knowing we've got 15 minutes in total, to what's within her control. The first point here is to understand your value. I'll kick off with understanding your strengths and value. And that's actually, it sounds very flippant, but that's actually really important to sit down. If you haven't done a strengths test, do the strengths test. If you are in a situation where you are in meetings and being overspoken, overlooked, all that sort of stuff, actually sit down and think quite hard about the value you bring. What was the perspective you were going to share? What is your preferred method of communication? And you can start to build a toolkit. For example, is it best to send notes after the meeting? Is that preferred to you? Is it better to ask for pre-readings so that you can come in really prepared? Would you like to know the dynamic of how do we structure this? Is it worth asking an agenda where you can say, hey, can we make it really clear at the top that we're going to go around table and ask questions? Or what are the different structures that you can do just by knowing how and what value you offer?
Yeah, and I think even knowing your value, you go in with a renewed sense of confidence to any situation. So we talk a lot about leadership style, how it's this perfect mix of your strengths along with how you want to show up as a leader and lead to what you value in the workplace. And those things can all be part of the makeup of what you bring to work, and really taking the time to reflect on what those are. We have lots of resources on them, and it is effectively then kind of defining your identity and recognizing you might be different than everyone, but you are unique, and unique is valuable in this world. And in fact, we need diverse perspectives, especially in meetings. And so I think this gives a boost of confidence, knowing who you are and what you bring to the table while you're at the table.
I agree. And I'd actually say that's top of your list of value or strength is if you're in meetings consistently, and reading between the lines here, where you feel intimidated and not taken seriously, my assumption is that you're an outlier in a group of people who probably look and act quite similar. So that in itself, when you think about all the terrible business decisions that are made around the world because a group of same people get around the table and have no understanding or awareness of all the other considerations and perspectives and risks that come out of making that decision because it is outside of their understanding, that's when you can start to go, oh, well, by default, me being here brings a huge amount of value to this conversation, and chances are no one else is thinking what I'm thinking, and it's not that obvious to everyone else. So that gives you a huge boost just walking into the room.
Well, and I think there's a couple things in there you said. The first was a mindset shift in that this isn't a me problem. This isn't, I am in this room because of XYZ. I've got the title, the job. I've been invited to participate. And, me feeling this way actually isn't a me problem. This is, I am in an environment that, as you said, looks same, therefore probably some deeply held stereotypes, unknown bias happening there, maybe known. It's really shifting your mindset to saying, oh, this is a them problem. Firstly, the mindset shift, but I also think there's small actions where you can actually crack is it the egg or crack the creme brulee? Like, I just picture this hard shell, whereas if you just start with very small actions, you could kind of break down that shell of this sameness.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I was thinking about this question on the way here, and one of the things that I was thinking was actually being overt with your style. And by that I mean, if you are someone who's not going to ask 1,000 questions or speak up a lot in the meeting, if that's not your style, then you can say, hey, at the beginning of the meeting, hey, I'm the person who's going to just be really quiet during this meeting and think things through, but I'll probably have 1 or 2 questions that I need to ask throughout. Just saying that at the top it puts you in a position of power rather than you just not talking. You've actually said, this is my style, and I'm going to be processing all the stuff that's happening, really observing what's happening, and probably going to have a couple of really big questions at the end. That to me, that immediately it's that old wine analogy that we love. Don't change the wine, just change the label. You've now just explained what your wine is to the group.
Yeah, and this could apply to those that are from different backgrounds, but equally those that in strengths. I know people have taken strengths tests and they've come up very high, top strength being thinker, second being analyst, and those are classic. Usually they represent as introverts, and they're classic people that don't need to take up space in meetings. They need a lot of time. They need more time to digest the information, but their superpower is in when they make comments. It could be later that day, it could be at the end of the meeting, it could be the next day. They're really powerful and worth listening to because they've really looked at the challenge, the situation from all angles. So
yeah.
This could be really helpful advice for underrepresented individuals, but equally those that historically haven't taken up a lot of space in meetings.
The other thing I was thinking just as we're talking about this is the assumption here, and maybe it's some of those words like intimidated, is that is true for this person. It could equally be true that this person is actually a big talker, a real extrovert in most situations. And in that case, I would reverse almost my thinking a bit from I feel intimidated and overwhelmed, how do I sort of assert myself, to what do I want to say in the meetings? Like when, rather than sort of focusing on that, and we've talked about this a bit, that sort of internal struggle of I feel underconfident and you're sort of really going round and round in circles, just pay attention to what's happening in the meeting. And when it makes sense for you to talk and when you normally talk. And it's sort of just removing that dialogue from your head and just putting it to one side and focusing on what's happening and just jumping in, if that's your style usually as well.
Yeah, and that moves to our kind of last few points, which is communication or meeting strategies. As part of preparation, you might be writing notes or doing some reading or prep for the meeting, which you should be, everyone should be. What are the insights that you've learned from this prep? Maybe just write down one and find an appropriate place, even if it's at the end of the meeting because you haven't been able to get any space during it, to pick that insight and share it.
Absolutely. Or in that same vein, why not pre-meeting send through the agenda or ask for an agenda and make sure there is, or even say, and I actually had a great example of this on Friday, a woman who went up to a man in the office and said, I've noticed in the meetings when there's a lot of men in them, you all talk amongst yourselves and the two women never are included. So she picked someone who she trusted to go to, and I said to him, what have you done as a result? And he said, now I make the point of making sure I ask if everyone's spoken. And I said, oh, and the second thing you could do is actually go to all those men and say, hey, I've noticed that we all talk amongst ourselves and maybe we need to leave space. So there are options there to kind of raise that and say, be it in an email with an agenda to a trusted person, to say, what are the options available to us to free up some airtime for other people? Because my assumption, again, reading that question, is that there are some loud voices in that room, and that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the making of an ally right there. And with our 2 minutes to go, my final point probably...
That was a pointed comment at Natalie.
My final comment is if you don't have an insight, active listening can be an incredible tool as a leader, where an active listening is all about genuinely taking a minute to hear what is coming out, hearing what they're saying, and to ask questions that, number one, asks them to further clarify what they're saying. You might be asking questions about what have the experience been with that thing. Active listening can show that you're engaged. Even if you don't have this incredible insight, you don't need one. Just ask a great question.
I, again, have been reflecting on someone else who's gone through this. She wasn't of Asian origin, but was very underconfident at work, and she came to a power session and she took some really small actions as a result. And what that did was change how people responded to her, which created this incredible positive spiral that by the end of the month, people were proactively coming to her for advice and support in a way they'd never done before. So my final two is body language. I don't care that you are smaller. I don't care that you feel shy. Shoulders back, head up, like don't fiddle. These are things that it is just 100% a display of confidence, that it is so important. We call it fake it till you make it. You can call it whatever, but actually eye contact, like be in the room, because that is the sometimes when we feel uncomfortable, the way we display that is by shrinking away. And we've both been in meetings with people who do that. And as more loud people, you interpret that as disinterest and disengagement. And so that's a very easy way to show engagement. And then the second part of that is your language. Stop the sorries, stop the maybes, and really just clearly and directly say what you want to say in the meeting. You don't need to apologize for your presence.
You don't need permission.
Those are very small things to catch yourself. Maybe meeting one, and I think we've had this as an action in a newsletter before, ask an ally in the meeting to just pay attention to your behavior in the meeting and just give you some tips on what you might do differently next time or how they interpreted it. And you might be really surprised by how you turn up is being interpreted quite differently from how you feel on the inside.
Hope that was helpful to our anonymous Powrsuiter. Again, if you've got a question, let us know. There will be a poll in this particular podcast. What have you tried in meetings that's really worked when you've found yourself in this situation? And we look forward to more of your great questions, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.